I'm going to start the recording, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everyone gets to see the agenda for today.
Martha is our vice chair, isn't she?
I am. So, okay. Can we approve the minutes from our December 21st meeting?
Sure.
So Martha, do you want to see if there are any public comments on items not on the agenda?
Do we have any members of the public who are on the line?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And do we have any members of the public who would like to make any comments not on the agenda? I don't think we do we have any requests to speak forms?
No, there were no requests to speak forms.
Okay. All right. So we can consider that done. Okay. No public comments. Do we want to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I would say that's up to the commission. I mean, I don't know that we have a flag to do it, but it's up to you as the chair of the meeting and the commission.
I shall take my flag that I have, and we shall say the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody?
Boy, there's preparation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
to the flag
of the United States
of
of
the United
America
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
And I hope the inauguration goes as planned.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, so can we move on to the items for consideration? Approving the minutes from the December 21st meeting.
So move.
Yeah, I read them. I think they're fine.
Okay.
Was that a motion by Gary and a second by Tony?
Oh, actually, if you're being technical, I wasn't there, so I can't
You can.
either move because I wasn't there. I shouldn't.
Well, you can.
Okay. Well, I did.
Yep, you did.
You can record that if it's all right with everybody.
And I was there. I'll give you a second, Gary.
Okay.
And I apologize for not having attended your meetings. Do you normally do a voice vote or do you do a roll call vote?
They need to do a roll call vote.
That's what I was wondering.
And they really actually needed a roll call at the beginning to establish a quorum and the presence and attendance.
Can we do that now? Or can we just?
Yeah, how about we do them together? So we'll do a roll call. So what I'll do is I'll ask Helen if she will call names of the commissioners, and then by your vote, we'll determine whether or not you are here.
Okay. So Commissioner Mark Frey.
Here, and I approve.
Commissioner Tony Richmond.
Here and approve.
Chair Martha McClatchy.
Thank you. Here, approve.
Commissioner Gary Callback.
Here and approve.
Chair Kuji Kalkat.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. Are you guys voting on something?
Hi, Kuji. Yes, we're we're voting on the commission is voting on the minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, got it. Okay.
As well as we're establishing a quorum.
Oh, okay. I read the minutes, and if there's a motion, yes, I'm in favor of approving it.
And Commissioner James Martin looks like he is absent for now.
Yes.
Okay, are you ready to move on to item number 2?
It seems like we have a few people from the public on the. So did we stop for a comment from?
So Martha did ask for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe if you like, because there are a couple of people that you may or may not know.
There's only one that says public. The other names I recognize. So.
Okay. But maybe if I could take a second and introduce our interim city manager.
That'd be great.
Who has joined us. So Brad, I don't know if you want to say a word or two.
Yes, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. Well, welcome, good evening, and just wanted to introduce myself. I'm trying to log on quickly to the various commission meetings just to sit in and meet everyone and review your agendas. I really have to thank the council and the staff. They have been onboarding me over the last 5 days endlessly, and I'm trying to catch up, but special thanks to John, who's been doing a great job of helping me get up to speed. And for this commission, the only thing I was going to relay at this point is the top of the list for both John and I are to shore up the staffing issues in the administrative service department, specifically finance. So we're working on that as a top priority. Look forward to working with all of you, and thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready to move on to item number 2? Sorry to jump in. And again, I apologize for not having attended many of your meetings in the past and understanding how they've been working virtually for you.
You're doing great. Yeah.
Okay, so item number 2, I'll actually turn over time to Vice Mayor Enander, who is here to talk with you a little bit about what she and former council member Jeannie Bruins discussed. They were tasked by the council to develop to look at the finance, how the city handles financial planning and reporting, and to make some recommendations. And so she wanted an opportunity to talk with all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Maginot, and welcome to our acting city manager, interim city manager. Glad he's able to join us this evening for a little bit. It's a little bit of an unusual situation because the person who is your council liaison usually doesn't say much during your meetings. That's not our job. Your job is to do your job. And this is instead a situation where the council tasked a subcommittee to look at some things. They involve your commission, and it was the feeling of both the council and the chair of your commission, as well as the subcommittee, Jeannie and I, that it made sense for us to talk about these with the entire commission before the council discusses them further. So I basically I read most of the highlights of this to the council at a prior meeting, and they said, oh, let's go and talk to Finance Commission about this before we the council talk about it. So my goal tonight is to go through many of the items you will recognize as being things that you have actually recommended that we do, and I tried to capture all of those. There's one notable exception which I will talk about, and really to kind of flesh this out, answer questions that you might have, and see if there are other things that you think we ought to incorporate into this, and what would be your recommendations before the council discusses it. So the purpose that's on here is the purpose for setting up the subcommittee originally. And during the course of Jeannie's and my conversations, I did talk with Kaljit, she had talked with Kaljit, we talked with staff and so on, and we ended up with breaking our recommendations into 2 timeframes: the near term, meaning kind of the mid-year financial review, and then the longer term full year cycle. So whoever's running the slides, would you go to the next pair? This is great. So as far as the mid-year financial review, which is, you know, immediately in front of us, and that would be to compare the forecast to actual revenue by major revenue categories for Q1 and Q2. What we recognize is that some of the things which we may have been a little bit more casual about in the past, it's not wise to be casual about those, and especially in terms of content. So looking at the assumptions that we based this year's budget on, and whether the revenue is actually coming in that way or not seems to be something we ought to be trying to do as part of our mid-year review. Describing any reasons for the differences in the prospect for the next 2 quarters, because we are, you know, we have time to make some course corrections before the end of the fiscal year. Looking at the status of the CIP, including options for either, do we want to continue a project? Do we want to defer a project? We may have a project very early in the status that we think it's actually wise if we don't, you know, do anything more with that, you know, don't want to go out for the RFP after all, don't want to let the contract after all. We still have time to make those kinds of adjustments mid-year, and then to recommend any other changes for the balance of fiscal. None of that should be earth-shaking, but it was just an attempt to lay out what we think the council's expectations are of what they want to see coming forward from the finance department, but as well recognizing that the Finance Commission has an important role to play in reviewing that, making comments, representing the public, giving it visibility and transparency to the public. And sometimes I think we've had in the last year or 2 where the schedule for this to come to council was very compressed, and maybe you didn't have time to really review and weigh in on some of these. So one of our goals, not written here, but implicit, is that you have time to comment on all of these things and review all of this before it comes to council. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there's comments on that page.
If I may, my only comment on that page, and whether it's intentional or not, in the first bullet talks about the forecast actual revenue. Yep. Does that intentionally omit spend by major categories? I would have thought you look at whether the revenue is coming in and whether you have any major spending deviations from the budget.
The only reason it's omitted is that we always do that piece.
Yeah.
We have not always done a piece of looking at the revenue projection. So all we're doing is calling out something that hasn't routinely been done. But you're absolutely correct. And yes, to be complete, it should indicate the spend as well as the forecasted revenue.
So I just want to add one thing, which is, you know, the first step way before this can happen is the one that the Financial Commission has been asking for, which is we have to close our quarters. You can't compare these numbers if we haven't closed our books for the quarter. So we've been asking for a long time. I think the last letter we wrote to the council saying that it should be required that the quarter close, and there should be reporting of what the quarter was. So, I mean, we've been using accounting and finance terms by saying, can you close the quarter and review it? And you've been more explicit about what you want to see in the review. But the fact that we don't have the staffing to actually even close quarters on time is what is the bulk of the issue here. Now we have the systems that will allow us to do this, but we don't have the manpower to actually produce this data if we don't close quarters.
And I think what you'll find is that is on the next set of slides or the next set of pages as something that we recognize going forward we need to do, and that the council, we the subcommittee, are recommending that the council completely endorse and place on the staff that expectation that we will close quarters. This page, this first page we're looking at, are the near-term things that we think realistically we really need to do as part of the immediate mid-year financial review that's in front of us. Recognizing that because of staffing, we may not, that's why the formality of saying close the quarters is on a later slide. Anything else from anybody? Okay, so the next slide on the right are things that I think you have recommended and or council has recommended and we're all in violent agreement about. So I just want to check in and make sure we're all still in agreement about these. And that is that the council has said to staff that we want to be sure that all staff reports on projects that involve funding come forward with the specification, not just of what the money amounts are, but where the funding is coming from. And in the event that it is a non-budgeted item, that the report includes where staff is recommending that money should come from and whether there is another budget item that should be deferred or whether the money's coming out of, you know, reserves or where they think it should come from. But if it does mean deferring something, the recommendation on what would be deferred, and then establishing a policy for assigning all of the reserves. And this is something we really would be looking at the Finance Commission to be doing with staff. And you and I discussed this, a policy, not just a process, not just doing it, but a policy that kind of guides how we are going to assign excess of operating reserves over expenses for CIP, CalPERS, OPEB, and so on. And then integrating CIP budgeting as part of the annual budget. And then I ought to really give the floor to your chair and say, Kalji, do you want to expand on any of these?
You know, I think it's just actually really great to hear the council say these back, you know, because we've been sort of saying this. In fact, I think the last 5 tactical prescriptive items we recommended to the council include all of these things, that this is what we think should be happening. So we're just happy to see, you know, the council having traction. I do actually add, it just occurred to me, Nita, now that Gina is not here, I mean, for your subcommittee to function, there must be somebody else who's been appointed to it. It can't be a subcommittee of one, I imagine.
Well, technically the subcommittee is kind of sort of done with Jeannie's departure and us providing the report to council, but they did ask me to come back to you guys and talk with you and then represent what's going on. So they did not appoint a replacement and an ongoing subcommittee to go any farther. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I guess one more, if I may, on this slide, and I think I'm going to say something that everybody understands, but it's probably worth making the comment. In the third bullet of the right-hand slide, it talks about assigning the reserves. And just so we're level set, I think, and I think I speak for the rest of the commission, there's really 2 issues embedded. It's one thing to assign and establish the reserve. Then it's another thing to ultimately act on it. And CalPERS is the best example of it. And that is to assign a reserve to CalPERS is great, but unless you actually take the next step and use the money to attach to the CalPERS liability, you financially haven't accomplished what I think you set out to do. So as long as everybody understands those are really 2 steps, and the second step has been wanting on some of this, then I just thought it was worth reminding everybody that it's not just the bookkeeping entry, it's then acting on it.
Great point, Tom. Good job.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that I think we need to figure out the how of is how are the Finance Commission going to participate in pieces of this where it's appropriate?
Yep.
And I don't think we need to resolve that tonight, but I think I called you that. That's one of the things you guys can talk about is how does this get worked into your work plan?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we talked about last time, Anita, is that some of this is just the rhythm of how finances are run for any operation, and they should be part of the work plan. So we have a work plan. In fact, we're up for adoption of it for this year. And if something needs to be added to it that's actionable enough to be added to it, then we're open to that. And beyond that, we are here at the request of the council. So if those are the non-recurring components of our work plan, that if there are one-off actions you want us to help the council with, we're ready to. Particularly those things are usually about a policy change that's a one-time change that we don't have to be involved in every time, or a one-time decision about an extraordinary payment of some sort, etc., which is what would happen here. So I'm expecting that maybe, I think this thing overlaps with our work plan pretty well, but there might be maybe a couple or three new items that we can add to our work plan. I'm mindful that, our work plan is pretty full, so it's not like we have extra months that we can meet. We only meet once a month, so it's going to be tricky if we add too much.
Yeah, the bad news is that there's nothing preventing you from having an extra meeting.
Except a life. Most of us work for a living. So.
And I think the council is very mindful that you guys and effort into what you're doing. So I'm not usually a joke. Can I have the next set of slides, please?
Yes.
Yeah. So these were things that we felt we ought to be looking forward to, and I'm glad that we've got Mr. Kilger still here and also John, because these are things that, as staffing and capability allows, we really think are important. And that is, first of all, to establish an annual schedule for the budget and the quarterly reviews and the other key points where the council needs to take action or wants to take action on regular and recurring things, so that we don't put it off. We don't end up with a calendar that's so full that, oops, we really didn't get to that budget thing tonight that we thought we were going to get to. And that you also have it built into your budget or your schedule where council's going to look at this issue, whether it's approving the CAFR or mid-year review or whatever it may be, or looking at a closed quarter, and you've had adequate time built into your calendar where you can be confident to act on that. You're going to have time to look at it. You can act on it in time before it needs to come to council, so that your actions at least a couple weeks ahead of us, that we don't end up with something in our packet the day before the meeting because, oh, it was just last night that Finance Commission got to look at this. So those are the kinds of things we want to avoid. We want to have a much more systematic, even type of calendar in that regard. And improving internal processes so that we've got, there's your quarterly closes, Kuljit, and that we close each quarter and that you get to review each quarter. That the joint meetings that we have look at Q1 and prior year, if it makes sense to do those together, Q2 with the mid-year, and then improve the timeliness of our decision-making on any changes. Then closing the fiscal year, having you with time to review the end of the fiscal year, and really looking at, and this is something I think you guys can discuss, and pardon me, Martha, you can all discuss, and that is looking at the end of year, perhaps even before it goes to the auditor, because although it's important that we get the CAFR and we get the full audit, it may be important for us to look at least our preliminary closed fiscal year numbers and say, hey, where are we? And, let's assume these are right, because I don't think we've ever had much in the way of changes from what's submitted to the auditor and what comes back in the CAFR. And we need to act because of our financial circumstances even before we actually see our final approved CAFR. So let me stop there with that page and get comments on anything I've said so far.
These are mostly on you. You guys have to schedule this and tasks for the staff. And I imagine if we do all of this, you're going to have like a full-time financial reporting person in the department. So this might add a whole headcount.
It might, or we might find that our new financial system is such that we can generate these reports so much more easily that we get them without having to add much in the way of staff burden. So then moving to the next set, quarterly revenue projections. And this is really about looking at the assumptions is in keeping track of assumptions for revenue and then actuals and making adjustments to those on a routine basis, and having as part of the schedule, like we know, we the city, we know from the county their best estimate on our sales tax at a certain time, and they know during the year, and then we know when that sales tax actually shows up. So we've got cash flow knowledge, but we've also got projection knowledge. Same with property tax. So reviewing the actual that we get and saying, oh, how close was that to what our projection, our assumptions were, and do we have a oops we need to take care of, or maybe we have an extra gift that we can figure out what we're going to do about. But it's partly too about giving the council a little more insight than I think we've sometimes had as to what was going on in the financial world. And I'm sure that you'll all be thrilled if the council keeps track a little more closely of what's going on in the finances of the city. A routine schedule for updating projects. And this really goes to the question of that you've raised on knowing what's happening and when are projected fees coming in. One thing is the bunches of fees that come in from development projects that functionally reimburse us for the operating costs of running the department. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking here about the park and roof fees and the other big chunk development fees that we get to spend. We have the situation that I know you're all familiar with, where there was a disconnect between council, staff, and finance commission in lieu. This is really trying to refine from the development department their timeline projections on whether and when certain park in lieu fees and similar fees are actually going to arrive. So that it's one thing to say, oh, in the next 3 years, we think we're going to have $6 million or $8 million or $10 million in park in lieu. It's another thing to say, oh, gee, we planned on this because we thought it was going to come in, but gee, these guys haven't come forward with a set of building plans yet. So they're at least 6 months, 9 months out before we're going to issue a building permit. So we're not going to see that money until the building permit's issued. So it's just kind of trying to tighten that up a little bit and give everybody a better insight and confidence about when that money is what that money is going to be and when it's going to come up. Then the next one is expanding the Finance Commission's role in the quarterly investment portfolio reviews. And this is something that Kaljit and I talked about at some length, so that there's really a meaningful narrative that comes to council on the expected versus actual results, any policy recommendations on apportionment or changing apportionment among investment types, anything that's other than kind of the routine cash flow driven changes that might result in portfolio rebalancing and so on. And then finally, exploring forecasting and scenario options in the new software, something that seems way beyond something we want to ask the staff to do right now since they're swamped, but that going forward that we'll have some better tools available to them than we've had in the past. So I'm going to stop there. Comments or questions?
Yeah, I think the one expand what it says finance commission role in quarterly investment portfolio reviews, etc. And that kind of makes me think. I mean, this is something that I'm not sure if you have it here, but I think it would be helpful that whenever we actually have a financial report, either a quarterly or an annual, that there is some sort of an English language, summary of it from someone that accompanies it. It could be the commission. We could write one, every quarter saying, hey, this is how we feel the finances are going well or not, or these are points. Or the city manager could, or the finance director could, or something. Somebody needs to not just put out the facts man, but also do a little bit of just interpret that a little bit, right? So I think it'd be kind of helpful to actually have that kind of discipline. It's pretty normal practice, a CEO would write comments to, and a CFO would present the numbers whenever there's a quarterly report from a public or from a private corporation. This would be kind of a similar analogy that would be helpful, because I think people glaze over the numbers, but they might actually listen to or read some verbiage better.
Yeah, and I think what the council, and I don't want to speak for the council, but I think I know my colleagues pretty well. I think what I'd hear from many of them is that generally we would expect staff to be doing that kind of interpretation. But what we would look to the Finance Commission to do is make any comment about whether you think there are policy matters or matters relating to what you know as residents that we should be considering as a part of whatever comment or recommendation might be coming from staff. But it's something that I hope that Mr. Kilger will put on, and John Maginot will put on his list, their list of things to look at as the staff goes through this rebuilding effort, so that we do have a better idea, you know, what do we really want staff to do, what do we really want the commission to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all exactly right. My only other comment on this page, or at least just in terms of text, just my view, I think in terms of the investment portfolio, at least for the immediate future, I actually don't think there's that much to be done there, assuming that the city's going to stay with the policy it has, which is essentially investment grade debt, 5 years and that's not going to change very soon. If I were to observe on an omission here, there's nothing here that talks about evaluating and making sure you've given some thought to liability management. And the two things that occurred to me, just make sure everybody's level set on, is first of all, on the community center loan, there's going to be a once per year option to pay that loan down on a more accelerated basis than the amortization schedule. And somebody, it was on our work plan, but somebody, and particularly the staff, needs to be aware of it, because it's not an evergreen right, it's an annual right. And my second observation, not to be unduly provocative, there's nothing here that talks about how the city is going to evaluate its contingent liability portfolio and when, where, and how, and some probability weighted assessment as those contingencies turn into cash obligations. And I would observe that, to me, is the largest imponderable in how the city budgets the next few years. And this doesn't address it. It may not be this commission's job, it may be the city manager's job, but that strikes me as important.
Yeah, and I think when I opened, I said there was one intentional omission here that I would deal with, and you've exactly raised what it is. And it's actually in two pieces. One is where the council may be, and I'm going to talk specifics here, we made an expenditure that you guys didn't know about on the front end. And there were reasons why it could not be discussed in public prior to, or even in some cases, even staff didn't know about it through most of it, because it was negotiations as well as involving, in the end, the purchase also resolved some litigation issues. So it's something that I'm discussing, that Jeannie and I discussed, and that I'm continuing to discuss with the city attorney, because we've got both the issues of, if we're going to take an action, in this case, basically to acquire an asset, but that also cannot be done entirely in the public eye because it's, you know, real property negotiations, that kind of thing, or where we've got contingent liabilities because of legal issues going on. And the question is, how do we properly consider that? And what I want to tell you is that the council always discusses, in every case where we're discussing open litigation, we always discuss the hazards of litigation and the financial risks before we go forward, both the risks of the outcome of litigation as well as the cost of proceeding just in terms of fees. But how we properly create an account and account for that without basically tipping our hand that there's something going on where what we do that might become public affects or might affect the negotiations that might be going on, is a little bit of a dicey issue. And so it's something that the city attorney is researching.
Isn't some of this already public? I mean, there's an article about the lawsuit against the Los Altos, and it had a number of 6 million in it from the Mercury News this week.
Yeah, but the claims of what's on and without discussing any particular litigation, in the event of litigation, if a party files a motion, or the party in filing their action makes a claim for X dollars, they can claim whatever they want. They can file for whatever that is. It may be the opinion of staff, it may be opinion of the city attorney or any outside counsel we may be working with, that claim either is unlikely to be successful, or if successful would be at a markedly smaller amount of money. All those kinds of discussions are very, what do we say? They're protected discussions between client and counsel, between counsel and the city attorney. And so to take whatever filing someone might make and say, oh, gee, we need to establish a contingent liability for that amount of money, I think our city attorney would say, yeah, that's not really the right thing to do either. So it's all, what I want to do is reassure you that the issue is well understood by council. It's being discussed and considered by the city attorney, and that I have no doubt that Mr. Kilger will have further conversations with the city attorney based on his own experience on ways and how we can properly protect the city's budget, which is I think what we're all concerned about, is how do we make sure we protect the city's ongoing budget and ability to do our work and provide our services, with when we know that there may be obligations coming out of litigation.
Well, the point is that the amount that's being discussed is high enough that it just completely overshadows any other stuff that you're doing. If there are 4 or 5 cases and they're odd, in even 10-15% possibility add up to be double-digit millions. Then it's what are we we're focusing on hundreds of thousands when there's tens of millions that we are at risk for. So it kind of just makes a lot of the stuff moot if the reality is anywhere in that. So how are you planning for it? You don't have to tell us, but somebody's got to do that planning. And then you should just sort of, defocus a little bit on the other stuff and saying, okay, this is just the other stuff about figuring out that we made $100,000 more on our portfolio this year or not is just kind of wasting time.
Well, I'd like to think it's not wasting time, because I'd like to think that $100,000 can matter. But I do take your point, Kulji, that we as a council have to, and all I can tell you is we are always looking at what is the downside risk, what does that look like, and what would that do to our budget, and how do we make sure that if we have an adverse event that we're covered. And that's what we're still talking about.
What I'm concerned about, Anita, is that you're saying, and I think we had this conversation before, that there's no way to plan for it. And I'm saying you don't have to involve us.
No, I'm not.
We're not trying to ask you to change any processes. Make sure the city is protected for it. And as long as you can give us assurance that yes, it's done, we're fine. We're just a bunch of volunteers. We just want to make sure that we give you the advice that number will overshadow anything else that happens.
Yeah, and I don't want to mislead you to think that we're not planning for it. We are planning for it, but as a part of that, there are always uncertainties, and we have to include those uncertainties in our planning.
May I make a comment?
Absolutely, because you've got experience here, and I welcome that. Thank you.
Oh, well, I guess what I want to say is, again, I'm coming in new, and I appreciate the opportunity to see the policies and procedures being developed, and they will be discussed by the council and clarified, and we really appreciate the commission's input. My experience in the cities I've worked in is there is always a formal, and I don't want to say informal, but constant evaluation of the impact of unanticipated expenditures. And what you do at that point is determine if you need to make adjustments. I think the thing that I'm getting in tune with now for Los Altos is, when do you come back and rectify those in a formal way with your budget? And that's what going forward we're going to discuss with the council and the rebuilt staff, because I have, again, in my previous cities, I've been in situations where we've had these occur. The first thing I do is call the finance director. I say, okay, where are we with respect to our current budget? If it looks like this is going to go on, I speak to the attorney or I speak to the property owner. We always make sure that there is a financial source that can cover those expenses. But you are absolutely correct that those need to be brought back together and viewed in the big picture.
Yes.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but
you did.
What you're asking
exactly
is,
what I'm saying,
is
that I just need an assurance that you or the council are having the conversation that given a X million dollar possibility, we have some sort of contingent plan that says we're going to take this money out of here. Same thing as if we have a terrible earthquake tomorrow. We know, we've planned publicly for those things. We have a emergency operating reserve, right? I mean, that's why we make that sacred. We're going to keep that amount, and that's public. You can't make this public. You can hide it under a lump sum saying, okay, this is a $20 million bucket that we keep for unknown things or whatever, right? So you don't have to play your card out to saying, okay, this is for liability A, liability B, liability C. But we just want to make sure that the city actually is having a conversation about this thing in terms of how to pay this out if it happens, the eventuality of it, not just that what the amount is.
Well, I'm not in a position to promise, but I am in a position to say every city I've been in, that has occurred.
Great. Yep. Thank you.
And the council knows that and is working on it. So.
Yep.
Yep.
So the point is, does any, and I'm agreeing with all of you, but does something need to go on this slide deck so that we recognize the importance of that point? Point being that if the Financial Commission isn't going to be privileged to the early discussions of potential litigation or potential liability, that the council and the city manager are seeking some other financial advice somewhere.
Or have a plan.
Or have, a plan to do that.
Right.
And maybe, I'm just thinking maybe the external auditors are the first step, but that's going to be your worst case. And they're going to give you the worst case.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, well, oh, no. You don't want the right information?
Can I make a suggestion at this point, since I'm not, I would suggest to make a footnote at this point as a comment with respect to what the commission's concerns and expectation is. I think there's a better way to state it, and I'm not coming up with it tonight, but I would footnote that at this point. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely. So fine with me.
Yeah, be great.
And we're going to do that with all the commission's comments.
Yeah, no, look, I think we've been trying to be brutally direct, that a bunch of us are all a little chagrined that we took a city balance sheet that was in, if anything, overfunded, and made some decisions to make some spending decisions that are substantial, which is largely sticks coming out of the ground behind City Hall there. And then we've got other stuff that kind of just fell out, and a contingent liability pot that was largely empty all of a sudden was quite full. And so all you're hearing, Brad, is I think we all felt surprised by that, not only by the quantum, but by the magnitude, particularly of one case that went really south really fast, and with numbers that were material to the city. So let me crystallize that in the next decision, which is one I keep harping on, which is we've had $5 million allocated to CalPERS as long as I've been on this commission. I don't know, 2.5 years now anyway, which would have been much better off financially had we released the money to Sacramento to start turning off 7.5% or 8% or whatever the accrual is at CalPERS now, rather than sitting at 40 basis points in treasuries. And then the hard question is, do we have the liquidity to do it? Because we don't have to release that money. But if we have enough liquidity to fund these contingencies, then we should get that money up to Sacramento, which in the long term will garner a dramatically higher rate of return on the money by turning down the CalPERS obligation. But that's a balance sheet decision where you're trading liquidity for a long-term return. But if you have 10 or 15 or $20 million of contingencies out there that are problematic, then you might decide, I'm going to hold that reserve. I'm going to hold on to the liquidity now because of that. And so that just crystallized one of the decisions that's hard to make with that level of opaqueness as to what your balance sheet obligations are that aren't on the balance sheet yet, and trading liquidity. No, but you can always trade liquidity for a capital position, but then you don't have the liquidity, you don't have the cash. And the company, the city's dissipated a lot of cash to build a facility that's been promised for the better part of a generation. We're all fine with that. It's just too opaque right now. So, I mean, I'll stop. I think you've been, it says Louisville Slugger over the front of your head backwards now over our concern. I'll stop, but that's the concern. It's just opaque, and the numbers are big.
Understood.
And I want to go back to something that Mr. Richmond said earlier, and that is making those OPEB decisions and the pay down, which I think I raised at the last commission meeting, is building into your work plan, although not maybe this year, but a note so that 5 years down the road, when we're perhaps in a better circumstance and when we're out of the first penalty phase for the community center loan, that you do look at whether we can do a payment on that loan. So a way of capturing, there needs to be a way of capturing those trigger points that we want to keep in the annual plan.
Exactly. That's in our work plan, and I completely agree with that. But again, it's a liquidity issue of whatever that is, 3-point-something% money, really, really cheap if you get in the liquidity crunch.
Right. So, and I think, I mean, for us to make that decision independent, in not knowing what the rest of the liability is, doesn't make sense. So that's why maybe the way, Martha, to address your concern about what we put on this thing is just have language that says that there'll be a review of the balance sheet. We have never had actually a conversation about our balance sheet, the city's balance sheet. We actually don't have a full understanding of what our assets are worth. We have some appraisals here and there, but how much is that orchard really worth? We don't know, and we don't have a full understanding of what our liabilities are.
I'm going to take issue with one thing. I do think we have a periodic, I'm looking at John Maginot, we do periodically reassess the value of city land, which would include the orchard. Am I right, Mr. Maginot?
Yeah, we typically will have appraisals done of the land that we do have. I don't know if it's broken down granularly to the, orchard is this much versus the overall.
I'm just sorry. I'm picking on the orchard. I love the orchard.
Well,
I'm just saying, okay. Sorry?
I just want you to know we do get assessment.
Yeah. No, I know we have appraisals, and that's how we got to that, the La Salle, using the library for the lease back. But I'm just saying that maybe one way to capture this thing, our concern is to have saying, okay, there needs to be a discussion about the balance sheet, and then you'll have to talk about the liabilities.
Yeah. And maybe that's a part of, because I went back to review what's in our municipal code about the finance commission, since I'm now your liaison, and it indicates that one of the things that you're supposed to do is an annual report to the council. And I'm not sure that that's happened, at least in the 2 years I've been on council. Maybe that's a part of, reviewing the balance sheet as part of the kind of an annual report. Here's how we see the balance sheet. And if you've got something going on that you can't share with us that's more than about X dollars, then we would have a concern.
Well, we have a meeting with the council every year, and that's to report on our work plan. So that's what we've been using that for. But if we want to have a review on the state of the city's finances, we can add that to that specifically.
I think it's something to think about. something to think about. So I'm sensitive that I've already consumed an hour of your meeting, and I apologize that it's gone this long, but it seemed to be pretty important that we be sure we're capturing the things that you're concerned about and that we're going to take care of it.
Okay, so we are where we started earlier, which is please let us know what you think is totally that's synthesizable to be a work plan item that you would want to propose to the commission. We understand, we like the fact that you have come up with these things. These are in many ways reiterating things that we have been asking ourselves in the last few times we've met the council or written to the council. And you've kind of heard our comments and concerns, which I think is good for Brad also to get current on some of the concerns. So as a next step for this thing, for the commission, it would be to, if you want to suggest a work plan item.
I think the thing that would probably be most helpful, especially given our current staffing situation, is if you could rough out a calendar based on what you know for quarterly reviews.
We did that already. It's in our work plan.
Okay, so it all of these items, or
no. Our work plan has a quarterly review, and there are dates associated with it.
Okay, and are those dates well enough in advance that if the council needs to take an action, and I'm going to look at Mr. Madge.
No, they are a month after the quarter closes. Are
they in time for the commission to make comments at least a couple weeks before the packet goes forward to council, if the council is going to need to take an action? Because one of the issues that the council has had is that the financial information we were being able to or being asked to act on often did not come to us until 24 hours before our meetings.
So Anita, I'm going to jump in since John hasn't really been to many of our meetings recently.
He's been to our meetings. So.
Sure. But our work plan, which we think is a solid work plan, has to be looked at now in light of this full year cycle and mid-year cycle agenda items that have been created by the subcommittee. There's no doubt, and this is not a yes/no answer. Our work plan includes some of these and doesn't include others, and the timing of our work plan matches up with some of these items and not with others. And not knowing when we are going to meet this year and not really knowing when the council meets doesn't allow us to have yet a work plan that matches up with this.
We did the work plan based on our best guess of when we think the staff is available and able to actually produce some of that information. And then we filled in the other months when we said, oh, well, this month there isn't much, so let's do a policy review on something that gives the staff, gives us something to do. But obviously, if the quarter hasn't ended, you can't do a quarterly review. So we just put our quarter reviews at the month after the quarter ends, so we built a cycle like that. So like when we see the CAFR, we just gave the staff an opportunity to say, okay, when you have submitted the CAFR to the auditors, that's the month we want to see it. So that's how we built it, but you were welcome to look at it and see if that gives you enough time or not.
I think staff's in the best position to look at that schedule, look at the council schedule, and say whether or not all these dates, because we're basically backing into your dates based on any fiduciary or legal responsibility deadlines that we have.
Yeah, if I could jump in really quick, I think sort of one of the key aspects of all of this is one of the first sort of points that the subcommittee came up with, which is having that annual schedule of when everything happens. So when is the mid-year going to happen? When is the budget going to happen? When are other, when's the CAFR going to be reviewed, et cetera? And then I think it will make it easier, getting that schedule established will then make it easier so the commission, so we know we can work backwards from there. So we know, okay, the council is going to approve the budget at the, second meeting in June. Then it needs
2 meetings.
Yeah, and it will take 2 meetings. And so the financial commission needs to review it by this date. And so I think that will be one of the most important aspects of that.
So I guess we turn that piece of it over to staff, and the further discussion of this is my responsibility the next time with council, with the footnotes and the comments, and I will amend this based on your comments this evening, which I truly appreciate.
Can I ask how much staff do we have in the finance department right now, John?
That is a fantastic question, Kuljit. At the moment, we have.
I was going to ask our acting director. By default, Helen is is the most senior person in the staff. So, but I think I'll defer to you.
Yeah. So in the actual financial division, we have 3 full-time staffers right now.
And there is an accounting clerk.
So there are 3 account technicians.
Yeah.
And then we also have some part-time help, some consultant help, and then of course Helen, who is in the overall admin services department and helps out everywhere.
Right.
It's also helping out in the finance.
So we don't have a single person there who can actually close a quarter. We don't have a single person who can produce a report. Those people can do data entry.
Yeah, and that's
make sure that your invoices get paid. That's about it.
Yeah, and that really gets back to Brad's earlier point, which is this is top of the list for he and I, is getting folks in to do just that.
So what is your realistic expectation that you have a viable working finance department by when? How much time are you giving yourself?
John, let me answer that one.
Go ahead.
Given the current status of the finance department, administrative service department, I can't give you a date because it's that serious. And the most important thing we can do is get the resources in there immediately to make sure that we can keep the financial position of the city first and foremost. I think John and I have had 2 meetings since I've been here to go over the possibilities, and we're going to have to get resources in there. But I think it's more than just shoring it up in the short term. We need to look long term relative to what really I think will meet the city's needs. And I think the current structure, and this is me, I'm not speaking for the council, John, or anybody else, but my initial assessment is the current structure isn't quite, regardless of who you put in, it isn't quite meeting what the expectations are of the council or the commission. So we're going to be looking at that. With that said, we can't wait to put that together. We have to get the resources in there now to make sure that we can meet the next needs of the next 6 months. So I got to tell you something. I'm really glad to be here, but this is a challenge.
It was a challenge before you came here, Brad. I mean, I don't know why, but I had this discussion several times with our city manager that saying that we don't have 17 positions filled is fine was kind of strange to me. Why do we have those positions? And I could clearly tell just from my interactions with the multiple departments that we are, stressing people out and not really providing services to the residents, and claiming that we can balance our budget by doing that was just strange. So we started from a deficit, and now it's gotten a lot worse.
The good news is we did let Mr. Kilger know before we hired him.
Yeah.
I did not walk in the door and
no. Thank you, Anita. Thank you. You have to know my style. I tend to be a little flippant at times to my own detriment. But I take this very serious. Yes, the council gave me a full heads up and warning, and I guess the appropriate thing to say is I love a challenge. But trust me, this can be fixed. It can be done. We need to work together to do it, and I'm not being facetious. So we got to do it.
Okay. Well, we're 6 months into our year. I don't think I can see us closing half a year, for a couple of months. So.
Well, if I may, John, I think you have been working on it. You might want to give them an update on that, or.
In terms of the last fiscal year, I can give an update on, but
we are behind. Yes,
yeah, we are.
But we need the CAFR, the audit, and the mid-year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where are we on those 3?
And so exactly. So we are working on it. We are planning to have the CAFR and the mid-year come to the Financial Commission at your next meeting, so in February, so that it can then get to the council hopefully by the end of February for their review. Now, to Kuljit, your point, I think you were saying actually closing the quarters, and as was alluded to, we'll need somebody in who can help us do that, and so that's one of the things that Brad and I are looking for and looking to get so that we can close those.
Thank you. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want to point out one thing, Brad, which is that you cannot close a quarter when the process is not in place to do anything. Still the other departments don't have the training or the processes in place to actually use the system. People are still writing manual invoices. People are still, requesting checks by hand. Their files being transferred by paper. The rest of the city hall is not equipped to actually use the system at this stage.
And I will add on to that. We are getting there. The finance staff that we do have is working diligently to train those of us in other departments on how to use the system, how to process invoices without ever printing out a piece of paper and without ever writing out anything. So we're getting there.
And I don't want to be a stick in the mud, but you've got some of this on your agenda. And if you're going to change your agenda, you kind of sort of need to officially do that. Your agenda order. and normally John is the one who's yelling at people about that, but he's busy kind of trying to give content. So I thought I would mention, if you want to change the order of the agenda to take advantage.
No, we can just finish it. We don't have to cover that. That's the informational item you're saying on the agenda. We have one important agenda item, which is to approve the work plan. So the question now is, do we approve this and then let the council of the subcommittee recommend changes, or do we just hold off?
I think it would be staff who would be recommending changes, at least on scheduling, rather than council.
Okay. Okay, then I think we're just going to go ahead and vote to try and approve this. So this has come back the second time with the changes we talked about last time. Most of them were had to do with making which one was it, Helen? There's a number 7, yes. Broader. It said just, I think now it says that we are talking about reviewing unfunded liability broadly. That was the biggest change we had. Was there anything else that we changed, Helen, that was significant? Oh, park and loo, that we were talking about that. I think Martha had some comment about it in the description section.
Yeah, I think another one was number 9. So instead of the 10-year plan, we changed it to a 5-year projection and analysis.
Yeah. So those are the changes that we had discussed last time and they've been made. So I was wondering if can we have a motion to adopt these minutes of this work plan?
Move we approve it. This is Gary.
Second. Thanks, Mark. Should I do the roll call? I don't know. We lose.
We can ask Helen to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Richmond?
Yes.
Commissioner McClatchy?
McClatchy, yes.
McClatchy, sorry. Commissioner Frey?
Fry, yes.
Commissioner Kalbach?
Yes.
Chair Kalkal?
Yes.
And Commissioner Martin is absent.
Okay, great. It looks like we've adopted this, but we're open to modification as soon as we can. Okay. All right. Next topic.
And last thing on this. I hope that at your next meeting, or certainly at your meetings as you move forward, staff will be able to provide updated dates on some of the dates that you do have listed on there.
Okay. So, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping or just focusing on that because it's 7:10 and we've been pretty good usually about being judicious about our time, but we had like a little bit of a free fall conversation, so which was important. We haven't had a discussion like this or a crisis like this, frankly, for a while. So, there is a council commission meeting coming up. So it's timely that we discuss this because we won't get a chance to discuss this next time. There's no action, there's nothing to approve. Would you give us an idea of the expectation? Usually in the past, we just show up with a work plan and give a report on what we've done in the past on our work plan and what we anticipate to do.
Yeah, exactly. So this is typically you have your joint meeting with the council in November. You'll remember last November it was canceled because it was right around the election and there was scheduling conflicts. And so it has been rescheduled for the first Tuesday in February. And you're exactly right. So this will be an opportunity to sort of review what the commission has worked on the past year, what you have on your work plan coming up, and any issues that the council, any items the council may say, hey, have you thought about looking at this? Or we'd like you to focus your attention on that. And I do not have a time yet, but it'll be in the evening. I believe we're starting the first meetings, I think at 5:30, 5 or 5:30. And then we usually are wrapped up before 9. So it'll be a half hour, 45 minutes meeting for the commission, somewhere in there.
Okay, so then unless somebody else feels otherwise, it seems like we don't have to do any kind of special prep for it. We just have to be able to talk to what we did, and we'll bring our notes and memory and give a verbal talk. We don't have to. We're not writing a statement down for the council board. Is that okay?
Yeah, and staff will make sure that your work plan is included in the packet that the council gets, so they will have that. And as you say, you can talk to that and have a discussion.
Okay.
So who of us is going to be there?
So this is intended to be a joint meeting between the full council and the full commission.
Okay.
So everybody.
So, I mean, you're going to hear, if they ask us just the same concerns that were raised there. One is that we're concerned about this unknown amount of liability on our books. And the second is that we are terribly concerned about the crisis in our staffing because it could bring our department, it has brought the department to its knees. So those are the two things that obviously are kind of the fires that are burning as far as we're concerned. Okay, thank you for that. Meeting schedule. We have a meeting schedule. Is there a reason to?
Well, so this was something that Helen and I, as we were discussing the meeting, this coming meeting, talked about how, and this is something that I've done with other commissions, where at the beginning of the year, establish what the schedule will be for the year, particularly if there are meetings that need to be moved because of a holiday. So for example, your meeting in January would have been yesterday, but because of the holiday, it was moved to today. Right. Same thing in February. Normally it would fall on a holiday. And so moving it to the following day, just as an opportunity for each of you to get the dates, put them on your calendars now. Staff has them. There's no question. Okay, what's the date for the July meeting? Yeah. And so it's established, and then we can start working towards all of those items that you have on your work plan.
Yeah, for us, it's been always the third Monday of the month, unless it needs to be moved. So are you suggesting some changes?
No, it's just an opportunity to say, these are the dates for the year. Other than the meeting in February, which would be on a holiday and is just scheduled for the following Tuesday.
And we always check if we can't make it the next time. I'm sure the December 20th will be a challenge to meet, and sometimes we have an issue with the July or August meetings because of travel. Does anybody remember that travel?
Maybe this year we'll have that problem. Yeah. No, and this is not to say that a meeting can't be moved or rescheduled. It's just to help with the planning.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's great. All right, next item.
So the next item is the update on the year-end audit, which I kind of already mentioned. Yeah. We are working on wrapping up the CAFR and the audit and are looking to present that to the commission at your February 16th meeting.
Any issues have come up because this is the first time the auditors are seeing our new system?
To my knowledge, there are no big issues that have arisen or any particular problems. Helen may know a little better than I do, as she's been more heavily involved in it. But to my knowledge, there's no real major issues.
Okay. Anything, Helen? Are you aware of any particular?
No, I think everything's good, and we anticipate to get everything together by next meeting, and we're also going to be presenting the quarterly investment reports next meeting. So there's going to be a number of presentations.
So we'll have 2 speakers. Okay. Thank you. Next topic. Loan.
So the next item, and I'm assuming this was something that the commission wanted a report on at from your last meeting, just where we are at on the loan. All of the paperwork was turned in, filed. We received the money, and so everything should be set on the loan. I don't have much of an update beyond that. I don't know if there were other questions that you were hoping to get answers to.
No, we just wanted to make sure it closed, and I think our previous finance director did say that he did that before he left, so he let some of us know before he left. So yeah. So I was glad to know that the money's in, although I'm assuming we don't have anybody who can actually check our account, right?
we do have the ability to check accounts, but it was wired to us.
Okay, good, excellent, thank you.
And then Chair Calcat, if you like, the last item is the staffing update. We talked a little bit about that. Again, that's top priority for us, is getting the resources that the finance division needs.
So are you taking the approach of finding the full-time people, or are you looking for some temp help in the meantime? How are you thinking about it?
Yes, is what I will say. Quite frankly, yes. It's yes to both. So we are recruiting for some of the non-director positions, the senior accountant position. We're recruiting for, I believe the finance manager position has been posted already. And at the same time, trying to bring in at least temporary help in the interim. Now, one thing I will say, and I think Brad sort of alluded to it, getting the resources that the city needs, but getting the right resources is critical. We want to make sure that whoever we bring in is the right, is right for the city.
Yeah. We've had a few people who've been in these roles before who went up towards the hills without saying any names. If you can actually try and look in that direction, that would be really helpful. I think they could do this job well.
Noted.
Good, thanks. Okay, thank you. That's really good. So it seems like we covered the items you were going to give us some update on. Anybody else on the commission? Anything else to share? Travel plans? Okay. So I think on that note, we can adjourn. Is that okay, everybody?
So move.
Okay, all right, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thank you, Helen.
Oh, thank you so much, John.